At 3 a.m., a quiet hospital hallway echoed, with only the sharp beeping coming through the door of room 412. 12-year-old Evan grabbed the nurse's arm, his voice shaking. "Please don't let anyone in there. I'm begging you." Inside, his grandmother Grace lay unconscious, her oxygen monitor flashing red, each alarm faster than the last. Then it happened. A tall man's shadow slid across the doorway, someone Evan had never seen in all the years ago he'd stayed by his grandmother's side. He stepped closer, slow and silent. Evan's fists tightened. "Grandma, I promised you. No one gets near you tonight. Not him. Not anyone." The hospital lounge carried the cold stillness of early morning, and Evan sat at the very edge of the chair, fingers tightly interlocked, eyes fixed on the partially open door. He barely touched the lukewarm water the nurse had given him, his tension almost visible in the faint tremble of his shoulders. As Evan glanced around the quiet hallway, a deep voice familiar yet unheard for years ago cut through the silence. "Evan, that you? Remember me?" When Evan lifted his head, he saw Richard, the man who had vanished from their lives for so long, the neatly trimmed beard, the expensive coat carrying a faint cologne, and a smile that felt more practiced than genuine. Evan's expression froze instantly, his body leaning back without realizing it. "Why are you here?" His tone was polite, but his distrust was impossible to hide. Richard placed a hand on his chest, pretending to be hurt. "I'm still your grandma's son. I have every right to be here." But those words darkened the space around them. Evan steadied his breathing and answered quietly, "Grandma told me not to let you come near." Richard's forced smile faltered. "That makes no sense. Why would she say something like that?" Evan didn't look away. "She said it herself. Don't open the door for anyone, especially for you." A heavy silence settled. A nurse approached from the far end, sensing the tension, but Evan signaled that he could handle it. He didn't want to show fear. Richard's voice dropped, lower and sharper. "Evan, what do you think you know?" "I understand my mother better than anyone." Evan almost argued back, but something inside him stiffened. Instead, he whispered to himself, "Grandma was terrified because of him." Then he answered aloud, steady and firm, "She needs peace. When you show up she gets worse." Richard didn't respond. His eyes just grew colder, as if measuring the boy standing between him and the room. A light flickered overhead, sending a faint vibration down the hallway, and Evan instinctively stepped closer to his grandmother's door. "I'm the one who's staying here. I'll protect her." Though spoken by a child, the words carried a seriousness that couldn't be dismissed. The moment the tension outside faded, Evan quietly closed the hospital room door and let out a shaky breath. Inside, only the steady mechanical beeps filled the dim space, and his grandmother's breathing sounded even more fragile. He pulled the chair closer, sat beside her, and gently placed her thin hand in his palms. "Grandma, I'm right here. You don't have to worry." Even his whisper trembled slightly. A faint creak rose from near the foot of the bed. Evan turned his head and looked underneath. There, resting quietly in the shadows, was the familiar brown handbag Grace always kept close, one she once told him never to open. His fingers hovered above it for a moment. Why did Grandma hide this? Something in him knew this bag was tied deeply to the danger surrounding them. He lifted it onto his lap. The old leather was worn from years ago, but the clasp was still firmly locked. Evan felt along the inside, searching for anything unusual. Near the bottom, his fingers brushed a small metal shape. "What is this?" When he unzipped the pocket, a tiny key fell into his hand. It looked ancient, and an unfamiliar symbol was carved into the head of it. Folded beneath it was a single sheet of paper. With careful hands, Evan unfolded it. The handwriting was thin but unmistakably Grace's. Just a few lines. "Evan, if you found this you must keep the promise. Do not trust that man. When you open the safe, everything will become clear." His pulse quickened. The safe where? Searching his memory, he pictured Grace standing by the old fireplace at her house months earlier, staring into the bricks as if weighing a heavy decision. She looked the same, then worried. He slipped the note back into the bag, but kept the key tightly in his fist. "Grandma, I'll take care of it. I'll do what you asked." The soft rhythm of the heart monitor somehow made his resolve stronger. Suddenly, the doorknob rattled. A low metallic click echoed in the room. Evan froze, instinctively sliding the handbag beneath the bed and pushing the key deep into his pocket. A rough voice seeped through the thin crack. "Evan, open the door. I need to check on her." It was Richard. Evan's eyes hardened. "No, not right now." A brief silence followed. "Fine. I'll be back soon." Footsteps drifted away down the corridor, making sure the hallway was quiet again. Evan pulled the handbag slightly toward him and whispered, "So this is what she wanted me to protect." Just then, the monitor lines flickered. Grace's fingers twitched ever so slightly. Evan grasped her hand again and leaned closer. "Grandma, I found it. I won't let anything happen now." Evan waited until Richard's fading footsteps disappeared completely, then allowed himself a slow breath. The room was quiet again, but the silence only sharpened the uneasiness pressing on his chest. He touched the small key inside his pocket, feeling the weight of his grandmother's warning echoing in his mind. "Don't trust him. Why would she leave a message like that?" A brief announcement echoed through the hospital speakers, and Evan took the moment to peek into the hallway. But just as he cracked the door, "What do you think you're doing?" Richard's voice dropped down like a stone right beside him. Startled, Evan tried to shut the door again, but Richard pushed forward, gripping the edge firmly. "Why are you guarding this room? Is letting me inside such a big problem?" His tone carried a restrained anger that made the air feel heavier. Evan slipped slightly behind the door and answered, "Grandma told me not to let you in. I don't need to know the reason." Richard scoffed. "You don't know anything. Mom's been fooled by people her whole life." "People?" Evan questioned, but Richard quickly shifted. "Never mind. A kid like you wouldn't understand." The words settled into Evan's chest like a cold weight. They didn't sound like something a real son would say about his own mother. Richard tightened his grip on the doorknob. "Open it. I have every right to see her." Evan steadied his breath. "She needs calm. When you come around she gets worse." Richard leaned in closer, voice lowered. "I know you're hiding something. Don't pretend." Evan felt his stomach twist. Did he see the handbag? Did he notice the key? Still, he forced his voice to stay even. "I'm not hiding anything. I just want her safe." Richard stepped back, narrowing his eyes. "Fine. Then let's do it my way." He strode directly to the nurse's station. "That boy is blocking me. I can't even check on my own mother." His tone was full of exaggerated outrage, drawing every gaze toward them. A nurse approached Evan gently. "Is that true?" "He says he just wants to see his mother." Evan hesitated only a second before saying, "She gets anxious when he's here. It's real. She told me." The nurse seemed torn, but Richard jumped in again, voice cutting. "That kid's trying to keep her all to himself. Who knows what he's up to?" Evan clenched his fists, thinking of Grace's trembling breaths. Then he said clearly, "I'm protecting her. That's all." The air turned stiff. Richard ground his teeth and spat. "Fine. I'll talk to the hospital director. Let's see why a child gets to decide who enters." Then he stormed down the hallway. When he was finally gone, Evan let out a shaky breath. But even in that moment of relief, a new thought hardened inside him. "I can't wait anymore. I have to find the safe. That's where the truth is." His fingers closed tightly around the key. It felt warmer than before, as if carrying his grandmother's last plea inside the cold metal. After Richard stormed off to find the hospital director, Evan finally had a sliver of quiet, but it did nothing to calm him. Sweat dampened his palms as he checked a lock on the door again, making sure it clicked firmly. The dim room glowed only with the unsteady rise and fall of the heart monitor. Even that small light felt unsettling. "Grandma, please hang in there. I'll fix everything." His whisper sounded like a vow. He verified that the handbag was still hidden beneath the bed, then pushed the key deeper into his pocket. After a moment of hesitation, he cracked open the curtain and peeked outside. Raindrops clung to the glass like tiny beads, and in the parking lot below sat a black SUV. It wasn't a car he had seen here before. That car, it wasn't there earlier. Then someone inside the SUV shifted, turning their face toward the building. A low-brimmed hat, dark glasses. Evan's breath caught. "Who is that?" His instincts screamed a warning. Before he could think further, the monitor erupted. Beep beep beep. The pattern spiraled out of control, the numbers dropping rapidly. "Grandma." Evan rushed to her side. Her breathing had turned unstable, her fingers growing colder beneath his touch. A nurse hurried in, scanning the readings. Her condition just changed sharply. "Call the doctor now." Another nurse sprinted out the door. Evan backed up, his chest tight and his voice stuck in his throat. The first nurse glanced at him. "Did anything stressful happen? Anything at all?" Richard shaking the door violently flashed in Evan's mind, but he swallowed his answer. "I am not sure." The nurse's expression tensed, and she shifted protectively toward the doorway. No one should disturb her now, not anyone. Moments later, the doctor entered, adjusting medications and raising her oxygen. The room buzzed with urgent instructions. Evan stood near the wall, feeling every second stretch painfully long. The machine's erratic beeping gnawed at his nerves. Finally, the doctor approached him with a firm, quiet tone. "This is a fragile moment. Any external stress could make things worse." Evan nodded hard. "I'll keep everyone out, I promise." But the calm shattered again. Richard's voice boomed from the hallway. "Director, my mother is in there, and that kid is blocking me. This is unacceptable." Not long after, the hospital director appeared with security at his side. He faced Evan with a serious expression. "Is what Richard said true? Why are you preventing him from entering?" Evan felt the pressure closing in again. He took a breath. "If I stay silent now, Grandma might not survive." So he answered honestly, "She's terrified when he's around." "It's true. That's why I stopped him." The director looked as if he were about to reply, but through the window behind him, the black SUV's door slowly opened. Evan's stomach dropped. This isn't just a family issue, something bigger is coming. The hallway was already in disarray. Richard stood beside the hospital director with his arms crossed, pretending to be the wounded party, while Evan stood guard at the door like a lone shield. A cold heaviness spread between them, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then Richard gestured dramatically. "I don't understand why this kid is blocking me. I keep telling you I'm her son." But his voice held more desperation than sincerity. The director addressed Evan calmly. "Son, I know you're scared, but you can't keep her real family out, can you?" Evan's heart tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "She's terrified when he's here. It's true, she told me." Before the director could respond, heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway. From the black SUV came two large men, dressed in dark, unmarked clothing. Not hospital staff, not relatives. Richard glanced at them briefly, then looked away. Evan stepped back, instincts alert. Did Richard bring them? The two men positioned themselves near the door, scanning the hallway before giving each other a silent nod. They moved like people who were following orders. Security approached cautiously. "Can we help you?" One of the men replied in a low, calm voice. "Don't worry, this won't take long." Despite the polite tone, nothing about his expression was gentle. Evan turned to the director urgently. "They don't know my grandma. You can't let them in." The director hesitated, looking between the strangers and Richard. Richard quickly cut in. "Oh, they're just here to assist me, helping settle some things, that's all." His lie hung in the air like thick smoke. The men stepped closer. "Move aside." Only 2 words, but the pressure behind them was unmistakable. Evan held the doorknob tightly and blocked the entrance. "No. Nobody's allowed in." One man sighed, then spoke softly. "Don't interfere, kid. This isn't your business." A chill crawled up Evan's spine. "Our business? That has nothing to do with family." Security moved forward an inch. "If you threaten this child, we'll intervene immediately." But the men didn't budge. Suddenly, Richard shouted, "The safe inside. I need to check it. It belongs to my mother." Evan felt a cold spike ripple down his back. "The safe? How does he know about it?" The 2 men exchanged a glance with Richard, then shifted their attention back to the hospital door. Their hands moved slowly toward the handle. The director tried to raise his voice. "What safe? This is completely inappropriate." But Richard cut him off, yelling, "Move. This has to be handled now." The tension in the hallway snapped taut like a wire. Evan shut his eyes for a second, then shouted with all the strength he had, "Don't touch my grandma." His voice echoed down the corridor, but the men still kept moving. And then, The doorknob began to turn. The moment the doorknob began to turn, Evan threw himself forward, pressing all his weight against the door. His fingers tightened until they hurt, and he shouted, "I said stop. Don't come in." But the two men didn't blink. Muscles in their arms tensed as they pushed the door, metal grinding against the frame. Security rushed forward, but the men's stance was intimidating even without violence. "Step away from the door," the guard ordered, but the men ignored him, exchanging a short nod before forcing the door wider. As the gap opened, Evan hurled himself into that space again. "Go away. Please." She can barely breathe. Then from inside, the monitors screamed. Beep 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 beep. Sharper, faster, signaling critical danger. A nurse grabbed Evan's shoulder. "Sweetie, you have to move. This is dangerous." But Evan shook his head violently. "No. They don't know my grandma. Don't let them in." One of the men muttered in a cold, quiet voice. "We were told to go inside. Stand aside." Told. The word froze Evan's spine. This wasn't family. This was something else entirely. From the back of the hallway, Richard yelled, "Hurry. Once you get the safe, we're done." His voice cracked with panic. The director turned sharply. "A safe? In a patient's room?" Security immediately grabbed their radios, calling for reinforcement, but it was too late. The men added more force. The door trembled, hinges groaning under the pressure. Evan trembled but refused to move. "She told me to protect her, I promised." He pushed back with everything he had. Tears fell, but he didn't stop. Still, the widening gap proved how small he was. Shadows of the men stretched across the room, creeping toward the bed. Then, inside, the doctor shouted, "Her vitals are crashing. If anyone enters now, she could die." The words echoed, but the men continued. As the door opened halfway, Evan abruptly pulled the key from his pocket, raised it high, and yelled, "This is what you want, isn't it? This key." Every head snapped toward him. For the first time, the men hesitated. Richard's face drained of all color. Evan. Give that to me. Right now." Evan stepped back, gripping the key tighter. "No, Grandma said this stays with me." One man lifted a hand slowly. "We need that key. Give it to us. Now." His voice was low and threatening. And then, the emergency lights flashed. Sirens blared. Security breach. Lockdown initiated. Red lights drenched the hallway as the automatic doors began closing. The men spun toward the sound, and Evan seized the moment, clutching the key with both hands. He sprinted into the room. "Grab him!" Someone yelled behind him. The hallway erupted into chaos, and the situation finally exploded into full crisis. The lockdown siren blared as Evan slipped through the door and into the dim room. Red emergency lights flickered across the walls, and the monitor's piercing alarm filled the air. Doctors and nurses rushed around Grace, adjusting oxygen levels, administering medication, trying desperately to stabilize her fading breath. From outside, shouts echoed sharply, "Open this door. We need that kid." And Richard's frantic voice cut through, "Bring me that key. Now." Evan hugged the wall, heart hammering, while the chaos outside grew louder, but the danger inside was worse. Grace's breaths were shallow, her eyelids barely lifting. He stepped closer, gripping the key tightly. "Grandma, I'm here. I brought it. The key." His voice trembled, but determination steadied it. Then, her fingers twitched. A nurse gasped softly, "She's responding. Talk to her, keep her awake." Evan leaned in, voice cracking. "Grandma, there are strange people outside. They're trying to get this key." "Why? What is it?" For a long second, nothing happened. Then Grace's lips parted, a fragile whisper escaping. "Evan, that key holds your father's final records." The words seemed to freeze the room. "My father?" Evan felt the floor tilt beneath him. He had never heard more than vague mentions, never a real story. Grace gathered what little strength she had left. "Your father was tricked, used by bad people, then he disappeared. I feared they'd return. I hid everything." A tear slid down her cheek. "Richard, that man, he's not my son." The revelation landed like thunder. Evan's breath caught. "Not your son? Then who is he?" Grace rested her trembling hand over his. He's someone who tried to access your father's files. The safe holds the truth, the only proof that can protect you. Boom! The door behind them shook violently. Red light pulsed. The men outside were trying to override the lockdown. A nurse rushed to shield Evan. Stay back. They're forcing the door. But Evan no longer felt fear, only purpose. He clutched the key to his chest. Grandma, I'll find the safe. I'll find everything Dad left behind. I swear. Grace nodded faintly. Good, keep the promise. More guards and the hospital director arrived, barking orders. Block the entrance. No one gets in. Yet the two men in the hallway kept shouting, we need that key. Bring him out. Evan took a step forward, eyes blazing. This key belongs to my father. None of you are touching it. For the first time, Richard's face twisted with something he couldn't hide. Pure fear. The two men were forcing the door open when additional security arrived, their heavy boots echoing down the corridor. The entire hospital shifted into strict control. Block that side. No unauthorized entry. The security chief barked. The hospital director added sharply, remove these individuals from the ward immediately. For the first time, the two men stepped back, tension flickering across their faces. Their earlier confidence vanished as more staff appeared, sealing off escape routes. Richard also retreated a step, panic rising in his eyes as every gaze turned toward him. A guard approached the intruders. Identification. Now. The men exchanged a short glance before muttering, we're just here to help. But no one believed them. The director's voice turned cold. No one enters a patient's room without authorization. You have no rights here. Then, sirens. Police sirens approached the entrance. Evan heard them and finally felt the tightness in his chest loosen just a little. Moments later, two officers stepped into the hallway, point out the individuals involved. Security gestured toward the two men and Richard. One officer walked up to the men. You will provide statements. Attempting to force entry into a medical room is a violation. The men's resistance crumbled. They lifted their hands without argument, but the biggest collapse came from Richard. As officers neared, he burst out, I didn't do anything wrong. I deserve to see that safe. The officer eyed him coldly. Do you have proof you are legally related to Grace Collins? Richard froze. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The director, nurses, and guards all watched silently as the truth unfolded. The officer repeated, Can you prove you're his son? Richard stepped back, trembling. I can explain later. But the silence around him said everything. The officer shook his head. You will be investigated for obstruction and impersonation. Richard's voice cracked. Wait. This is a mistake. I'm not. But no one listened anymore. The two men were escorted down a side corridor, while Richard was separated for questioning. Gradually, the tension that had suffocated the hallway began to dissolve. Nurses exhaled shakily. Guards lowered their shoulders. The security chief turned to Evan. You're safe now. Don't worry. Evan finally loosened his grip on the doorknob. Then he looked down. The key in his hand felt warm, almost alive. Grandma was right. The line between good and evil was right in front of us. The hallway grew quiet. The storm had passed, but the weight of the truth remained. After the chaos settled, the hospital slowly returned to calm. Richard and the two men were escorted out by police, and the hallway regained a gentle quiet. Evan felt his knees weaken as the tension drained away. He leaned against the wall, eyes closed for a moment. The security chief approached. You did incredibly well, kid. Without you, things could have gone much worse. Evan managed a faint smile. I just had to protect her. He slipped back into the room and sat quietly beside Grace. Her face was still pale, but steadier than before. The oxygen mask rose and fell gently with each breath. Evan held her hand softly. You don't have to worry anymore. They're not coming back. Days passed. Grace steadily improved, and Evan never left her side. When she finally woke fully, sunlight spilled into the room like warm silk. Grace whispered, Evan, thank you for keeping the promise. Tears gathered in Evan's eyes. You told me to protect you. I'm not letting anyone hurt you again. Grace weakly brushed her hand along his cheek. Your father's records, you must find them. When you're ready, open the safe. Evan nodded. I was scared, but I think I'm ready now. A few days later, after Grace was discharged, they returned home together. Evan stood before the old fireplace, remembering the hidden brick Grace once stared at. His hands trembled as he pushed it inward. Behind it, a small metal box. He swallowed hard. Grandma, is it okay? She answered softly. It's time for you to know. The key slid into the lock. Click. The box opened. Inside were thick documents and a faded photograph. A younger Grace, smiling beside a man with the same eyes as Evan. My dad. His voice cracked. Grace spoke gently. He was a good man, trapped by dangerous people, but he fought back. Everything he uncovered, every truth he found is in that file. His last gift to keep you safe. Evan hugged the file tightly. I'll protect you. And him too. Grace smiled with quiet pride. You already have, dear. Soon, the town murmured about the event. They say the boy saved his grandmother. Shows who the real family is. Later, Evan and Grace created a small corner in their home. A wooden drawer labeled Evan and Grace Archive. A place for his father's files and all the memories they would build together. And the narration closes softly. Some promises don't end, they become the strength that carries a family forward. Thank you for staying with us until the end. We'll be back with an even better story next time. Your support, subscribes, likes, and notifications means the world to us.